seems to be working. Everything seems to be working okay. All right. Welcome to Uncolored. I'm Kevin Metcalf. Today I'm going to get into the theonomy thing that I've been putting off for so long, but I'm not going to spend as much time as I'd planned on it because, look, it's a bad idea, and there's one of two things that are going to happen. Either you recognize it when you first hear it, which makes a lot of what I'm going to say superfluous, although hopefully I can give you a little bit of insight as to why I think it's a bad idea, or just how it connects to a lot of other bad ideas, more of a sort of a meta look at the whole thing. Or you've heard it and you think it's a great idea, in which case it really doesn't matter anything I say. I think you're just nuts. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. What I'm going to do is just going to give you my impressions on the beginning, because Mike Winger, who had this on his channel, did this, I think, in a much better fashion, but he looks at it from a theological or biblical perspective. And for a lot of folks, I would imagine there may be some people who are watching who are just don't look at it that way, which is okay. We're going to be talking about theonomy, but you can replace that with any authoritarian, totalitarian scheme that has plagued mankind since the beginning of time, because that's really all this is. Any idea that this is some sort of a thing from God is just BS. Either Joel Webbon, who's the person I'm going to be talking about, and again, I don't know anything about any of these people. I don't have anything against any of these people. I'm simply talking about their idea and them as a representative of such a horrific idea. That's the criticism. So, as I said, if you don't want to look at this from a theological standpoint, you don't have to, because it really has nothing to do with God. You can replace it with socialism, feminism, any idea that says this, because this is really what's at the heart of this idea of theonomy, and all of the bad ideas. Again, that has plagued humans since the beginning of time. It says that I'm good and you're bad, and the differences between us threaten me in some way. Sometimes legitimately, sometimes maybe you have done something to me because of the differences. But that threat, that this existential threat, that the differences that you present, I have to find some way to mitigate that, to get rid of that so I'm not worried about it. And the best way to do it is for me to get some sort of governmental control, societal control, maybe it's corporate control, which is what's a lot of what's going on today. And control how you think and how you behave to align with how I think and how I behave. And if you don't, then I'm going to punish you for it. And that's all this is. Feminism does it. If you don't go along with, the transgender this, although I don't know how transgender competition with women protects women, but again, it always gets convoluted when you have these totalitarian ideas. All the conflicts always come up, and you'll start to see it here in Joel Webbon's presentation of theonomy. But it always happens the same, and this is why. Because one large body of people, one group of people, no matter how large, they're not able to effectively deal with the complexities of many, 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 many people in any group. That's why socialism as a system, it works good if you have if you're just a family, mom, dad, and kids. If you have a proper family, socialism works fantastic, because you're not going to feed your kids or clothe your kids based on merit. You have one kid that's, valedictorian, hitting the home run, helping around the house, just a great all-around kid. And you may have another kid who's, doing drugs, missing classes, and always in trouble with the police. You're going to feed them both, and you're going to make sure they both have clothes, because it's not a merit-based system. It's a socialist system. The difference there, though, is, one, you love your kids, and you're going to sacrifice for your kids. And the third thing is that socialist system is preparing them to eventually be replaced by a system where they stand on their own and they don't need it anymore. Okay? Any socialist system in the real world always wants you to be dependent on them. And they always want to treat you like you're a child who can't make a decision on your own. That's why it differs from the socialism that goes on in the home for young kids who can't make their own decisions. So it works on a very, very limited scale. But when you try to expand it to a whole community or a whole country, it fails miserably because the government doesn't love you. It always wants you to be dependent on you. And it certainly won't sacrifice its interests for yours. It's the opposite. Any government's going to sacrifice you so that it can stay fat and bloated and have a bigger budget every year. So that's why socialism is always evil. But at bottom, the point I'm making is, it's a system that says that I need to control everything, because people thinking and doing on their own is a threat to that kind of a form of government, because you don't need it. If you can make your own decisions and be successful on your own, you don't need a big bloated government, so you become a threat to them. Theonomy, in the same way, tries to mitigate a threat that it sees is being posed towards religious people, at least as Joel sees religious people. And the answer is, this theocracy is really what it is. It's a government ruled by religion that seeks to punish people who don't adhere to the religion. And Joel seems to think this is a good idea. But as I said, it's the same as every bad idea that basically says, I'm good, you're bad, so I'm going to get some sort of authority to punish you whenever you diverge from whatever I think you're going to do. Now, like all of these other schemes, feminism, the critical race theory, the whole Black Lives Matter nonsense, what happens is you eventually become the evil that you say you hate. So, for example, the feminist movement, the extreme version is what I'm talking about. They've combat what they believe is men who hate women by hating men. The critical race theory movement, or the Black Lives Matter movement, which again is just a BS movement anyway, but we'll just use that terminology. They say they're against the racism and discrimination. Well, what do? They use racism and discrimination against the people who they feel did it to them. So now racism and discrimination against white people is their tool. So in all of these schemes, you have to become the evil that you say you hate. And you're going to see that here with Joel Webbon. Same thing. The whole point I'm making here, at least the impression that I got from Joel Webbon's presentation, is that as these other systems do, he uses a very convoluted, labyrinthine way of speculative ideas that have these terms and terminology that sound really smart and pious. And again, every group does that. Socialism does it, feminism does it, the critical race theory does it. They make up all this terminology. And it's put together in this speculative way. They write all the books and they tell you about it, and you go, wow, you're sitting there going, geez, I guess it makes sense. You don't even know. But it all comes down to the same thing. I'm good, you're bad, and this is why I should be in control of you, how you think and how you behave. That's all this is. So let's take a look at just a couple of the things. First, I'm going to let you hear from Joel what he thinks this theonomy thing is, or how it's going to work. And then I'm just going to go off some of the questions that Mike Winger asked and just give you some commentary, and then we're going to end this thing. Because again, it's a bad, evil idea. It's got nothing to do with God. At least that's how it seems to me.
We kind of got to talk about.
I really want to talk about it.
Christian states, like government. You're right.
Yeah. So you're talking about like every government in the world, and tell me if I'm wrong, because this is how I'm understanding it. Every government in the world should enforce laws that everyone has to rest on the Sabbath, and everyone has to cast out idols, cannot practice idolatry in any fashion, and they have to put God first.
So right? No, that's extreme. I'm not saying that every nation should do that. I'm saying every nation will do that. Because I'm not only a theonomist, Mike, I also happen to be post-millennial. So I was being facetious. I don't think that's extreme. I think you're absolutely right. What you just said is my view. And not only do I think it should be done by every nation, I think it will be. I truly believe that. I think the nations are Christ's
so
inheritance.
You do think it should be done?
Yes, I do. Should and will. Not just should, but will.
Okay.
So I was being facetious there, but
understand.
so I don't just think should be. I think it will be. I think the nations are Christ's inheritance, and they are going to be Christianized, and that we are going to have a Christian world. And when I say Christianized, now I'm not saying that each and every individual is going to be a regenerate, born again Christian. But I do think that the nations, that societies as a whole, in every single nation, will be Christianized. And I think
so we should, as Christians, we should then, all of us, be working together to ensure that minimally the 10 Commandments are enforced through governmental laws across the country. So no sports on Sundays or Saturdays. I'm assuming that you would think the Sabbath is actually Saturday.
No. So
Okay.
Both Westminster and 1689. No, you're right.
That's a side issue, but
But yeah. So both Westminster and 1689, the Reformed view is they're all Sabbatarian, but they would say that the Sabbath has been not removed but renewed by Christ, who is Lord of the Sabbath by virtue of his resurrection from the last day of the week to the first. Is what the 1689 and Westminster Confession say. And
Sure.
of course you can push
And
back.
I won't
on
even.
It, but
I won't even push back on it.
Yeah, of course you can push back on it. I'm just articulating my position.
So there you have it. That's his idea, that every nation will be Christianized. And when he says Christianized, he'll go on to say, I'm not speculating here, that governments will be set up to enforce the 10 Commandments is the basic idea. So whatever the 10 Commandments say, that's what the law is going to be. Okay. Now, the one thing that I'm not clear on, although I have the impression that Joel thinks that this is something that we should all be doing right now. My first impression is, listen, if this is something that God wants, God will do it. And I don't think he needs Joel and any of his sort of machinations to do it. I prefer people like Joel stay out of it because I don't trust his judgment. Sometimes, well, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. Although when you listen to him, it seems like he knows a lot of stuff. He's going to talk about postmillennial, premillennial, and 3 phases of this, and it gets in all kinds of crazy stuff, as everyone does who has these kinds of schemes. It gets very, very complex, but I'm the kind of person who thinks this. If it's a really good idea, it's probably a pretty simple idea. It doesn't really get complex. Not that there isn't complexity to it, but at its core, it's probably a very simple idea. And you don't need all this craziness. It should make sense on a very simple level. Well, maybe that's just because I'm simple, but I think that all of the complexity that gets piled on there is problematic because this is Joel and his response to something that's pretty simple, Colossians chapter 12.
Hardest thing I had with Leighton was, and I'm sure I should have had a better answer, but Colossians 2, verse 12, having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith. And so he was like, so you see, Joel, raised through faith, not raised to faith, right? Regeneration preceding faith, but raised through faith. Your faith is what raised you. Now, the context, it seems, it's referring to baptism. Again, Colossians 2, verse 12 is where he hung his hat, and I struggled. I'll admit I struggle.
Now, for me, if I'm talking to, let's say, a math professor, and they're giving me all of this, high concept mathematical instruction, probably most of I don't understand, if not all of it. And then you ask him about, well, what about the Pythagorean theorem? And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. Then I'd be skeptical about this mathematician's, whether or not he knows all that other stuff he's telling me. Similarly here, Colossians 12 is a pretty simple one. It says pretty much what it says. That's how it seems to me. It's pretty straightforward. Yet Joel Webbon has problems understanding that. And I think it's because the clear understanding of Colossians 12, at least as it seems to me, doesn't fit with his ideology that's proposed by Calvinism, because he's a strong Calvinist. And because of that conflict, he can't see what Colossians 12 is plainly, if I understand it correctly. I think the same problem, if that's a problem there, then for me, I'm skeptical that all of these other terms and ideas that he puts out there, that he really understands them as well as he seems to. It's very speculative and tenuous, And all of these connections may or not be. It reminds me of when I listen to him talk, and you'll hear him. Sometimes you see those movies where there's like this dude in his basement, and he there's just some, something he's trying to put together, some scheme that he thinks is going on in the world. And he's sitting in his basement with all of these cork boards with photographs and things, and he's got these yarn going from place to place all over the room with this one, light bulb sitting in there. That's what it sounds like to me. Somebody who's got this weird idea that for him seems really, really clear. But there's a world out there that he doesn't seem to be able to connect with. That's a pretty simple world out there. And sometimes that's what I get the impression of Joel Webbon. He's in this world of these high philosophical, theological ideas that may be true, maybe not be, true. I don't know. But he's cobbled them together somehow to come up with the idea that he and people like him should be in control of the whole world. And that's not his idea. That's God's idea. That seems nuts to me. That's how this comes across to me.
And then you shall have no other gods before me, which the only way to really obey that command is to also have God. As you can't just not have other gods before God.
Right.
Obviously, you have to have God. So what would you propose as laws that would enforce that?
That is so insightful. I want to repeat what you said because our listeners need to get it. The only way to keep, because you can preach a whole sermon on that. The only way to keep the first commandment, to have no other gods, is to have God. It's because it's not whether but which. Culture comes from the Latin cultists, worshipers. We're homo worshipers. We cannot help but worship. And if we don't worship the triune God, the God that is, then we're going to worship some other God, even if that God is self. And I would say that's what humanism is: man, the measure of all things. And so right now, this is one of the things that I would say is, number one, I think that Christendom, because we've had it in the past, and I think the solution is not to do away with it. I think there are bugs and features, right? So Spanish Crusades, not our brightest, finest moment, but I think the solution is not to back away, but to press in. I think we need Christendom 2.0, and it's like Christian as this world religion enforced by civil governments, and I would just say it's not whether but which. Look at the alternative. What has secularism given us? I think that Christendom, on its worst day, with Constantine and on its worst day, Christendom can't even come close to putting up the death toll numbers that secularism has brought us. Brought to you by your sponsors of humanism and secularism, by Joseph Stalin. Brought to you with Planned Parenthood and 1 million abortions a year. It's not even close. Not even close. And I think people, they're just afraid, but what are Americans going to do? Start rounding up Muslims and putting them in internment camps? It's like, nope, that's already covered by China. And it's not because of the Christian worldview. Not speaking of Chinese people, but the CP, Chinese Communist Party, the government is not Christian. They are a secular, atheistic government. And the oppression that we see in the world, I truly believe it's not the fruit of Christianity. There are bugs within Christianity that gets it wrong at times, but nothing compared to anything else.
So you notice so far he hasn't answered the question. He's talking about what non-Christian societies have done, the atrocities that come from non-Christian societies who are doing the same thing, right? I'm bad, you're good, I don't like your ideas, so we're going to control you. So you get the internment camps. You get all of these horrific things that have happened throughout history because, again, can't handle you not agreeing with me or living your life the way I think you should. But somehow, him doing it, Joel's idea, is going to be better, apparently. I don't know. I'm not sure what he's getting at, but let's listen.
But the question is, my question is, how do you enforce that?
How do you enforce it?
That was my question. How do you enforce that?
So the way that you enforce it is, first, you have to understand 3 sovereign spheres. So there has to be this understanding of autonomous, separate spheres. So the church has been given the sword of the Spirit. My job as a minister of the gospel is the art of persuasion. We've been given the keys of the kingdom. I administer the sacraments of the Lord's Supper and baptism. I preach the word, pray the word, sing the word, and see the word in the only images prescribed ascribed to the church, which is baptism, the Lord's Supper. That's that, and then the keys of the kingdom have been given not just to me, but to I believe the church within my Reformed Baptist view. That's Matthew 18. Tell it to the church, and they get to bind and loose. So that's the idea of what authority, and it also gives me the idea of my jurisdiction. But these three sovereign spheres of the home, the church, and the state, they're not just spheres of human society, but I think we have to understand them as governments. And it's not a hierarchy of the state is above the church and the church is above the family, but it's three parallel governments side by side. And at times, their jurisdiction does overlap. And that's what happened with John MacArthur and Gavin Newsom, right? And you got to duke it out and figure out who actually has jurisdiction here. How do we move forward? What do we do? Does the church and its rights, the rights of the saints, in their obligation under God to worship in spirit and truth, trump the concerns of the civil magistrate that needs to protect people from physical harm with whatever, with the deadliest bubonic black death plague that we've ever had. And so, but as far as like so first understand three sovereign spheres as three sovereign governments. The next thing that you need to understand is there's a distinction. I think this is what where theonomy gets a bad rap and people misunderstand. There is a distinction between sins and crimes. And the law of God is, James says, the law of liberty. And one of the things that Christianity as a worldview.
Joel loves to talk.
And again, it's not whether but which. So how do you enforce it? Your question. The civil magistrate has been given the physical sword, not the church. So the church does not enforce it. Ministers don't enforce it. Fathers in the home don't enforce it. They've been given a tool. They've been given the rod. The church has been given the keys, and the state has been given the sword. The state would enforce it, but at the level only of crimes, not at the level of sin. And what's the determining factor between the two? It's not the two tables of the law. So some guys, that's a John Lockean kind of more of a not a Christian view like some of the Christian founders, but more of a Unitarian, a deist kind of view that's not, I don't think is robustly Christian. It loosely comes from King Alfred and these kinds of things, but they want to break up the two tables of the law and say, well, the state can enforce the second table of the law, commandments number 5 through 10, what we are commanded to do as it pertains to neighbor, but the state can't enforce the first 4 of the 10 commandments, which would be no other gods before me, no graven images, do not take the Lord's name in vain, and then remember the Sabbath. And I would say that theonomy is going to say, no, that it is the state's obligation to enforce not just the second table of the law, but all 10 commandments, but at the level of crime, not the level of sin. And one of the determining factors between the two is private versus public. So in a theonomic, let's just say that I'm right, and not just about theonomy, but also post-mill, and all this stuff happens in 100 years or 1,000 years, and we're watching from heaven. My bet, what I'm betting on, I could be wrong, but what I'm betting on is that you would not see a mosque be permitted to be erected. But you also would not see thought police going into people's homes to stop private Muslim worship. So if someone was a Muslim, they could worship privately in their home because the state does not have jurisdiction there. That is not, we are not policing sins in the same way that, looking at the second table of the law, if a man gets drunk in his home, we're not going in, but if public intoxication is a different matter.
Do you think the commandment about idolatry was not applied in the home in ancient Israel?
Well, I don't think that it was policed. I don't think that it was enforced.
So he finally gets to the answer, and it's basically, the state, will enforce these laws, the 10 commandments. The state suddenly enforces the 10 commandments. Again, it seems nuts to me. And how you can, and again, I'll say it again, he seems to know lots of things, biblical things. I don't know if they are actually from the Bible or not, but it's certainly from theology. He's got a degree and seems to know all this stuff about philosophy, all this stuff. So he's surely a smart guy. That's not what's in question here. Is he delusional? That's the question that I have. The idea that you're sitting at a football game on a Sunday, and suddenly the police come and round you up or hand you citations or whatever the punishment is going to be because you're not obeying the Sabbath. It just seems insane to me. And that somebody could come up with this idea, I question. I do. I really question their hold on reality.
Here's an interesting thought. doesn't that mean that the leaders in the church, studying the scripture, knowing the word of God, are supposed to be part of the functioning of government so that there isn't this totally independent sphere? Or would you?
I would say that
maybe not agree
absolutely,
with that view?
absolutely, but not functioning. I would say the difference, though, is the priests aren't the ones who ultimately get to put someone to death with a sword. I think that the priests go in and they inform the judges. And in a Christian, in a perfect Christian theonomic state, this example that we're talking about, hypothetical example, yes, I think that pastors, ministers of the gospel would be working hand in glove. They would be working in tandem with the state, but still with a clear delineation that they are not a part of the state. But they would be absolutely, they would be honored by the civil magistrate and informing them and educating them on this is the law of God. Do what is right.
I'm working with the state, but I'm not part of the state. Do you believe that? I don't believe that. That sounds problematic to me. I'm unconvinced that if you're working with the state to create laws to enforce upon other people, that you're not part of the state. I'm sorry, I don't make that distinction. But you see, for Joel, no problem with it.
No, the state must be Christian, and therefore it must, insofar as it's within its jurisdiction to punish crimes, it must punish those things which go against the Christian faith, and that would include, for instance, that there would be blasphemy laws. So there would be certain things, even within freedom of speech, that couldn't be said. But again, it's not whether but which. There are certain things within freedom of speech that we can't say right now, determined by who? Every culture has worship. It has a God. It has orthodoxy. It has sacraments, and corresponding with its orthodoxy, it has blasphemy laws. There are things that you can't say. It's hate speech. You get canceled. You could lose your job. All these different things, and it happens by a kangaroo court instead of actually tried with a fair jury. And so
Blasphemy laws. So if you say certain things, you get punished by the state. And I guarantee you, if the reverse were the case, he would hate that. I certainly hate it. But I got to tell you, and I've seen this several times, and every time I look at it, he sounds more and more crazy. And I hate saying that about the guy because I don't know anything about him. But he sounds like a nut the more I hear this. Blasphemy laws? I mean, aren't they already doing that in some parts of the world? Don't we already have that? And I don't know how you can say that that's a good thing. Now, I think what Joel will say is, well, no. The ones that we're talking about, these are God's laws. But that's what they're saying too over there. It's like the Lord of the Rings that everybody wants the ring of power. And all it does is corrupt the person who wields it and turns them into somebody evil. But we can't not put down the ring. Everybody wants the ring. Whether you believe in God, whether you don't believe in God, I gotta have the power to control other people. What they do, what they say, and what they think. And it doesn't matter, again, what face you want to put on it, whether it's equality for everybody or racial this or feminine that, or God's law. It's the same evil nonsense. It's the same BS. It's somebody who's afraid of their vulnerability to what other people can do to them. And we're all vulnerable in one way or the other. But the way to defeat that is if I got control of the government. And then I can punish those people who don't behave, don't think, don't say whatever I want them to say. And Joel thinks because he's hiding this, he's trying to get God to sign off on his BS, that it's the right thing to do. But he's no different from everybody else. The people that he said, Stalin and all those other folks, he's no different. The idea is the same, at least. That's what I'll say. It's the exact same idea. They just put a different face on it. And so I'm not going to spend any more time with this. I know I made a big build up to this, and I apologize if it didn't turn out to what it is. Because one, I don't want to come off, and I know I do, as being so critical of other people. And again, I don't even know Joel. I'm sure he's a nice guy, wonderful family, and I mean that. I mean that genuinely. The point I'm making is it really doesn't matter who you are, the pastor of the church or somebody out in the street who wants to get back at society for whatever reason. All of us have the capacity to come up with some horrific, evil things. If we get into this mindset that whatever I believe, it's right. It's just right what I believe, and it's impossible that I'm wrong. And once you get into that mindset, it seems to me that you can do anything and justify it in any way you want. Why? Because you're right. That's why I think dogma is such a horrific thing. It really just blinds us. And Joel, who seems like, again, very smart guy, seems like a nice guy from what I know. Again, I don't know him. I just see him on this, through the YouTube thing. But for him to assert and support such a horrifically evil idea, to me is it's like a shot of a bucket of cold water over the head. That, listen, any of us are susceptible. If we don't just back off and get a little bit of humility and go, you know what? maybe I don't understand everything the way I think I do. I mean, there's other smart people who have different ideas. Maybe they know something that I don't know. But when you get to the point, and I've done it too. I'm sure you've done it. You know, when I'm watching things that happen in sports, there's this kid in Alabama with the murder thing, and I think, man, if I was the ruler of the school, I would do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, but probably what's true, if I was the head AD or the president of the school, I'd probably screw up so many things it would be laughable. My point is, we all want the power to right the wrongs of the world. Everybody does. The problem is none of us are qualified to do that. That's the point. None of us are qualified to right the wrongs of the world. That's what God's going to do. I really think that what we're supposed to be doing, and again, this is, if you're not a Christian, if you don't believe in God, this is not going to make sense to you. But if you believe in God, it seems to me, all we're supposed to be doing is telling other people that you can have a relationship with God. That's the number one thing. Yeah, there's other stuff that goes around it, but I don't think world domination is a part of the message. I just don't. Maybe I'm dumb. Maybe Joel's 100% right, and I'm the idiot. It's possible. But from when I hear this, and I've heard it a number of times, he just sounds like he's off his rocker, man. And I hope that he's got a friend who can go, hey, Joel, man, you need to snap out of it, man. Step off the ledge, put the gun down and back away. Okay, this world domination stuff probably isn't the way to go. That's just how it seems to me. Like I said, I know I'm coming down hard on the guy, but he's wielding a very terrible idea as if it makes sense. So yeah, I'm okay being a little bit tougher on him this time. It's a stupid idea. It's been done before. It always works out bad for everybody. And when God's ready, God will do what he's going to do. Doesn't need us. He'll do exactly what he needs to do, and it'll all work out exactly the way he wants to. No scheming by us necessary. At least that's how it seems to me. All right. That's enough. Thanks for tuning in to Uncolored. Next week, we're going to go move to a different stuff. We're going to talk about some different things here, and hopefully I can make these things shorter. Hopefully this will be the last. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I don't even know why I said that. I'll probably do it again. But again, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. And I'll see you next time. Yeah. All right. Get out of here.